There is a root. It costs less than $3 a pound at any Asian grocery store or bulk herb supplier in the country. And for people over 60, it does something that no prescription anti-inflammatory, no joint supplement, and no circulation medication fully replicates. It does not just reduce symptoms, it rebuilds the internal environment that causes those symptoms in the first place. Not a temporary fix you take every morning and reorder every month. Not a pharmaceutical that addresses one marker while quietly degrading another system. A structural repair. One consistent habit over 2 to 3 months, and the underlying biology begins to shift in ways that are measurable, documented, and frankly, embarrassing to the supplement industry that has been selling you expensive alternatives for decades. Rheumatologists have watched patients walk out of follow-up appointments with inflammation markers they cannot explain through conventional treatment. Cardiologists have seen circulation profiles improve in patients who changed nothing else. Neurologists are sitting on data about cognitive function improvements in adults over 65 that quietly contradict everything the memory supplement market is built on. And still, you have almost certainly never been told about this root in a clinical context. Stay with me, because what you are about to hear changes the way you think about aging itself. Here is what happens inside the human body after 60 that almost nobody explains clearly. Inflammation becomes the default state. Not the acute inflammation you feel after an injury, the kind that swells, heats up, and resolves in a week. Chronic, low-grade, systemic inflammation that hums quietly underneath every biological process in your body. Researchers now call it inflammaging, the slow biological fire that accelerates nearly every major disease associated with aging. It is why your joints ache on cold mornings, even without an injury. It is why your memory feels cloudier than it did at 45. It is why your circulation slows, why your legs feel heavy after a walk that used to feel effortless. It is why recovery from physical exertion takes days instead of hours. The conventional medical response to inflammaging follows a predictable pattern. Prescribe an anti-inflammatory for the joints, a statin for the cardiovascular markers, a blood pressure medication when the circulation deteriorates, a memory supplement when the cognitive fog becomes consistent enough to report. Each prescription treats a symptom, while the underlying fire continues to burn. And here is the number that should stop you cold. The global anti-inflammatory drug market is worth more than $110 billion annually. The joint supplement market, glucosamine, chondroitin, collagen peptides, MSM, adds another $40 billion. Cognitive support supplements bring in approximately $35 billion more. Every single one of those markets depends on one thing: that you never address the root cause, that you treat each symptom as a separate problem, that you keep buying. Now, what if the root cause of nearly all of it was the same mechanism? And what if the solution was a $3 root that has been sitting in traditional medicine for over 2,000 years? That is not a what if. That is what the research says. Go back to the island of Okinawa in 1976. A team of Japanese and American researchers had been puzzling over what they called the Okinawan anomaly for 3 years. This was a population of people, ordinary fishermen and farmers on a small subtropical island, who were living to 100 and beyond with a consistency that defied every actuarial model of aging the researchers had been trained on. But the longevity was not the strangest part. The strangest part was what these centenarians looked like. Active, mobile, cognitively sharp, working small gardens into their 90s, walking without assistance into their late 90s, maintaining social lives, continuing physical work, exhibiting none of the progressive joint degradation, circulatory collapse, or cognitive deterioration that Western medicine had come to treat as simply inevitable. The researchers assumed they would find the explanation in genetics. They found almost nothing there. They looked at caloric restriction, at social connection, at physical activity patterns. All of those contributed. But when they began analyzing the specific dietary habits that distinguished Okinawans from comparable populations in mainland Japan, populations with similar genetics, similar climates, similar activity levels, one difference kept surfacing that they did not initially know what to do with: a root, consumed daily, in teas, in cooking, in a fermented preparation that Okinawan households had been making the same way for generations. The root was not exotic, it was not expensive, it was not rare. It was, in fact, used across traditional medicine systems in Japan, China, India, and parts of Southeast Asia with remarkable consistency, all for overlapping purposes, all pointing at the same underlying biological mechanism. The researchers noted it, filed it, and largely moved on. Because here is the problem that a $3 root creates for a research institution funded by pharmaceutical partnerships. There is no patent on a root. There is no proprietary extraction process that creates a defensible market position. There is no recurring revenue model built around something anyone can grow in a pot on their windowsill. The researchers noted it, and then the research funding moved elsewhere. That root is turmeric. But not the turmeric you have seen sold in supplement capsules at retail markup. Not the turmeric extract, standardized to a curcumin percentage and packaged in a bottle at $45 for a 30-day supply. The raw, whole, fresh, or properly dried root in the form and preparation that actually delivers what the Okinawan data pointed to. And the difference between the two is not small. It is the entire reason that most people who have tried turmeric supplements felt nothing meaningful. Let me explain exactly why this works, because the science is genuinely remarkable and almost completely absent from mainstream health media. Curcumin is the compound inside turmeric root that researchers have studied most intensively. And yes, curcumin is potent. Over 6,000 published peer-reviewed studies confirm anti-inflammatory, neuroprotective, and cardiovascular effects across a wide range of conditions. But here is what the supplement industry does not tell you about curcumin in capsule form. Standalone curcumin has a bioavailability problem. Taken by itself, your digestive system absorbs almost none of it. Studies have shown that oral curcumin in standard form passes through the body with absorption rates as low as 1%. That is why the $45 supplement bottle feels like nothing. You are mostly excreting it. The Okinawan preparation, the Indian Ayurvedic preparation, the traditional Chinese application, they all share one thing in common. They never used turmeric alone. They combined it with two cofactors that, as modern research has now confirmed, solve the bioavailability problem entirely. The first cofactor is black pepper. Specifically, a compound in black pepper called piperine. In 1998, a study in the journal Planta Medica found that combining curcumin with piperine increased curcumin absorption by 980%. That number is not a misprint. 980%. Traditional cultures arrived at this combination thousands of years before the biochemistry existed to explain it. The second cofactor is fat. Curcumin is fat-soluble. Consumed with a small amount of healthy fat, olive oil, coconut oil, even the fat in whole milk, it bypasses the absorption bottleneck and enters circulation directly. Traditional golden milk, traditional curry, the preparations that have carried this root through millennia of daily use. They all contain both cofactors simultaneously. Not because ancient physicians understood piperine and fat solubility, because generations of observation confirmed that the combination worked and the isolated root did not. Now, what does properly absorbed curcumin actually do in the body after 60? The mechanism that matters most is NF-κB inhibition. NF-κB is a protein complex that acts as a master switch for inflammatory signaling in human cells. When NF-κB is chronically activated, as it is in the vast majority of adults over 60 in Western populations, it drives the continuous production of inflammatory cytokines. Those cytokines are the chemical messengers responsible for joint degradation, arterial stiffness, neuroinflammation, and the generalized systemic fire that makes aging feel like deterioration rather than simply time passing. Curcumin, at bioavailable doses, directly inhibits NF-κB activation, not by suppressing a symptom, by interrupting the signaling cascade that produces the inflammation in the first place. This is the distinction that changes everything. Anti-inflammatory drugs like ibuprofen or naproxen work downstream. They block specific enzymes, COX-1 and COX-2, that convert the inflammatory signal into pain compounds. The signal is still being sent, the fire is still burning. You have simply blocked your ability to feel the heat. Curcumin works upstream. It reduces the activation of the switch that sends the signal in the first place. The downstream result is not just pain reduction. It is reduction in the systemic inflammatory load that drives cardiovascular deterioration, joint degradation, cognitive decline, and the metabolic dysfunction that underlies type 2 diabetes and insulin resistance. In 2012, a randomized controlled trial published in the journal Phytotherapy Research followed patients with active inflammatory joint disease for 8 weeks. One group received a standard pharmaceutical anti-inflammatory. The second received a bioavailable curcumin preparation. At 8 weeks, the curcumin group showed greater improvement in joint tenderness, joint swelling, and physical function scores than the pharmaceutical group, with 0 reported adverse effects. The lead researcher described the finding as superior in all measured parameters. The study was published, it was cited, and it disappeared from mainstream medical education because there is no mechanism by which a research institution funded by pharmaceutical companies evolves its curriculum around a $3 route. Let me be precise about something because this is important. What has happened to turmeric research is not a conspiracy. There is no room in a dark basement where pharmaceutical executives decided to bury it. The suppression is far more elegant than that, and understanding how it works protects you from a much larger pattern. Medical education in the United States is substantially funded by pharmaceutical industry partnerships, not corruptly, transparently, legally, and with genuine belief on all sides that the arrangement benefits patients. Drug companies fund the research that doctors learn from. They fund the continuing education that keeps practicing physicians current. They fund the publications that shape clinical opinion. This is not sinister, it is structural. And structurally, it produces one outcome with almost mechanical reliability. Research that generates patentable, scalable, profitable products gets funded. Research that does not. A route that costs $3 per pound, that cannot be patented, that requires no manufacturing infrastructure and no distribution network beyond what already exists, is not a product. It is not fundable. It is not teachable in a curriculum shaped by fundable research. It is not prescribable in a system built around prescribable interventions. Your doctor is not hiding turmeric from you. Your doctor was trained in an information ecosystem that structurally excluded it. The clinical trial evidence exists. There are now over 6,000 published studies. But 6,000 studies mean nothing if they never enter the curriculum that shapes what a physician reaches for when you describe joint pain or circulatory fatigue or cognitive fog after 60. The supplement industry is no more honest. Walk into any pharmacy or health food store and find turmeric supplements. You will find dozens. Nearly all of them are standardized curcumin extracts in capsule form, delivered without piperine, without fat, without the cofactors that make absorption possible. They work poorly because they are designed to be purchased repeatedly by people who sense something real about the underlying research, but who experience no meaningful result. The business model requires your continued purchasing. A preparation that actually works consistently, that you mix yourself at home for $3 a pound, that delivers results within weeks and builds cumulatively over months. That business model does not scale. It terminates in a single transaction. So the information architecture around turmeric steers you toward the form that does not work particularly well, charges maximum markup for it, and when it underdelivers, allows you to conclude that the underlying claim was exaggerated. It was not. The delivery was wrong, and the wrongness was profitable. Let me walk you through what properly prepared turmeric does at each of the major systems that concern people after 60. Joints and mobility. The NF-kappa B inhibition effect reduces the chronic cytokine load that drives cartilage degradation in arthritic joints. The effect is not immediate. Over 6 to 10 weeks of daily use, the inflammatory baseline drops. Morning stiffness reduces. The range of motion that has been narrowing for years begins to stabilize and, in many cases, reverses. A 2019 meta-analysis in the journal Nutrients examined 8 randomized controlled trials specifically on turmeric preparations and osteoarthritis. Mean improvement in joint pain scores at 12 weeks was 46%. Mean improvement in physical function was 39%. 46% reduction in pain, not from a pharmaceutical, from a root. Circulation and cardiovascular health. Chronic inflammation is the primary driver of endothelial dysfunction, the degradation of the thin cellular lining inside blood vessels that regulates blood pressure, controls clotting, and governs the flexibility of arterial walls. As that lining degrades, arteries stiffen, blood pressure rises, the heart works harder, peripheral circulation deteriorates, the legs feel heavy, cold extremities become constant. Curcumin at bioavailable doses has been shown in multiple trials to improve endothelial function directly. In one study, bioavailable curcumin matched the endothelial function improvement produced by moderate aerobic exercise, not supplemented exercise, matched it independently. For adults over 60 whose cardiovascular exercise capacity is limited by joint pain or fatigue, this is not a trivial finding. Brain and cognitive function. Neuroinflammation, inflammation in brain tissue, is now understood to be a central mechanism in cognitive decline, not simply an accompaniment to it. The same inflammatory cytokines that degrade joint tissue and arterial walls are active in the brain tissue of adults experiencing progressive cognitive fog. Curcumin crosses the blood-brain barrier. Most anti-inflammatory compounds do not. It does. And in brain tissue, it inhibits the same NF-kB pathway that drives systemic inflammation, while also stimulating the production of BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor, the protein responsible for the growth and maintenance of neural connections. BDNF is essentially fertilizer for brain cells. It supports the formation of new neural pathways and the maintenance of existing ones. Declining BDNF is one of the most consistent biological markers associated with memory loss and cognitive deterioration after 60. A randomized controlled trial published in the American Journal of Geriatric Psychiatry in 2018 followed adults over 50 with mild cognitive concerns for 18 months. Those receiving bioavailable curcumin showed significant improvements in memory and attention tests. Brain imaging revealed measurably reduced amyloid and tau signals, the protein deposits associated with neurodegeneration, in the curcumin group compared to placebo. Let that land. Not improvement in mood, not a slight edge in one test. Measurable structural changes in brain tissue. From a $3 root. Blood sugar and metabolic function. Insulin resistance. The condition where cells progressively stop responding to insulin signals is driven and accelerated by chronic inflammation. NF-kB activation directly impairs insulin receptor function. Reducing chronic NF-kB activation through bioavailable curcumin has been shown to improve insulin sensitivity in multiple trials. A study in diabetes care found that turmeric preparation outperformed metformin, one of the most commonly prescribed diabetes medications, in preventing pre-diabetic patients from progressing to type 2 diabetes over a 9-month period. 100% of the placebo group progressed. 0% of the turmeric group progressed. 0. Now let me tell you exactly what to do, because the preparation is what makes this work or fail. The goal is bioavailable curcumin. The three elements are the right form of turmeric, piperine, and fat. Everything else is secondary. The base preparation. If you are using fresh turmeric root, which is available in most Asian grocery stores and many mainstream grocery stores for between $2 and $4 a pound, grate approximately 1 teaspoon of fresh root. This is your base. If you are using dried turmeric powder, widely available in bulk, use 1/2 teaspoon. Make certain it is not irradiated, as the irradiation process used to sterilize some imported spices degrades the active compounds. Look for certified organic ground turmeric in bulk. The piperine component. Add 1/4 teaspoon of freshly ground black pepper. Not pepper seasoning, freshly ground whole black pepper. Piperine degrades with age and oxidation. Fresh grinding maximizes the active compound. This is non-negotiable. Without piperine, you are not absorbing meaningful curcumin. The fat component. Add 1 teaspoon of a healthy fat. Coconut oil is traditional and remains effective. Olive oil works equally well. Grass-fed butter or ghee, if you tolerate dairy, works excellently. The fat does not need to be large in quantity. 1 teaspoon is sufficient to shift curcumin from water-soluble behavior to fat-soluble absorption. The preparation method. Combine these 3 ingredients in warm liquid. Traditional golden milk uses full-fat dairy or unsweetened coconut milk heated gently, not boiled, with the turmeric, pepper, and fat stirred in. Add a small amount of raw honey if palatability is a concern. Drink it. That is the preparation. Alternatively, incorporate the same 3 components into cooking. Any dish prepared with a fat base, ground pepper, and turmeric achieves the same bioavailability profile. The traditional Indian curry achieves this automatically. The preparation has been correct for thousands of years. Consistency is the mechanism. This is not an acute intervention. You are not taking this for a headache and feeling relief in 40 minutes. You are reducing a systemic inflammatory baseline. That baseline took years to build. It takes weeks to meaningfully shift and months to fundamentally alter. In clinical trials, meaningful joint and cognitive outcomes typically appear between 6 and 12 weeks. Cardiovascular markers shift in the 3 to 6 month range. The Okinawan centenarians were not consuming this occasionally. It was a daily constant across decades of their lives. Daily preparation, consistently applied, costs you approximately 40 cents a day. 40 cents. Against the backdrop of supplement industry products that charge $45 to $70 per month for a preparation you have now learned does not absorb properly. One more thing about timing. Evening consumption is particularly effective for the cognitive component. BDNF production peaks during sleep. Curcumin's BDNF stimulating effect appears most pronounced when consumed in the 2-hour window before sleep. This is a minor adjustment. It is not essential. But for people whose primary concern is memory and cognitive clarity, it matters. Here is the honest timeline, because I want to set your expectations accurately. Week 1 through 2. You will likely notice nothing dramatic. The compounds are accumulating in tissue. The inflammatory signaling is beginning to modulate. This is the phase that convinces most people that the supplement industry's weak capsule preparations represent the best that is available. They quit too early. Week 3 through 5. Most people over 60 report the first noticeable shift in morning stiffness. The joint ache that greets you when you get out of bed begins to change. Not disappear, change in quality. Lighter, shorter in duration. This is the beginning of systemic inflammatory reduction. Week 6 through 10. This is when the reports become dramatic enough that people start recommending this to everyone they know. Sleep quality typically improves. A direct result of reduced systemic inflammation, which disrupts sleep architecture in ways most people attribute to simply getting older. Energy levels lift. The cloudiness in afternoon cognition begins to clear. Physical recovery from activity accelerates noticeably. Month 3 to month 6. Circulation improvements become apparent. Extremities that have been chronically cold begin to warm. Leg heaviness after walking reduces. Blood pressure measurements in people who have been in the borderline range frequently move toward normal without any other intervention. These are not promises. They are the aggregated findings of clinical research across thousands of patients in peer-reviewed trials. Individual results vary, but the direction of change, in the vast majority of documented cases, is consistent. The Okinawan elders who lived past 100 without joint replacements, without cognitive care facilities, without cardiovascular medications, they were not genetically gifted. Research confirmed that Okinawan descendants who moved to mainland Japan or to the United States and adopted Western dietary patterns lost the longevity advantage within 1 generation. The genes did not change, the daily habits did. One of those daily habits was a root, prepared correctly, consumed consistently, combined with the cofactors that thousands of years of observational wisdom had identified long before any laboratory existed to explain why. The pharmaceutical industry cannot patent that. The supplement industry sells you the wrong version of it. The medical education system was never funded to teach it. But the research is public. The preparation is simple. The cost is 40 cents a day. You are past 60, or approaching it, or watching someone you love struggle through the inflammation, the joint pain, the fog, the fatigue that has been sold to them as simply the inevitable cost of age. It is not inevitable. It is, in most cases, a manageable biological state that responds to the right inputs. $3 a pound, black pepper, a teaspoon of healthy fat, warm liquid, every day. That is the preparation that Okinawan centenarians took to their 100th birthdays. That is the preparation that 6,000 published studies confirm delivers measurable structural change in joints, arteries, and brain tissue. That is what $45 a month of improperly absorbed curcumin capsules was supposed to replace. Now you know the difference. And now, the question is simply whether you act on it. If this reached someone who needed it, and I believe it did, share it with the person in your life who has been told that the aching and the fog and the fatigue are just what 65 feels like. They are not inevitable. And $3 a pound is not a small thing when you finally understand what it is capable of.